Happy Low Friction Friday, everybody. Hope you're going well and hopefully having some drier, warmer riding than what we have here in my lovely little city of Adelaide, where it has been a little bit biblically wet overnight and some fun for some areas there. All right, let's get into overdue, the detail review for the Rex Black Diamond Immersive Wax. How did that go? How does it compare to the other immersive waxes, and how does that fare compared to all lubricants tested thus far? Alrighty, Rex Black Diamond Wax. So yeah, I'm pretty excited as always to talk about a immersive wax. I have I guess another one on test at the moment, which I do hope to be able to talk about soon, and potentially one or two more this year that I'll hope to be able to test as well. There are a lot out there these days, so a lot will not be able to be put through all the testing unless they book in with me, or if there becomes some compelling reasons as to why they should be tested, either really good or really bad. This one, however, so you may notice that there's been a fair bit of focus by a lot of major players in the either immersive wax space or wax strip space, or both. And really, the industry is trending very strongly towards wax, and for very good reasons. There are limitations with wet lubricants operating on an extremely hard working component that is exposed to all external contamination. There are times when wet lubricants can have an advantage in certain, especially sort of wet, long races, and obviously they're a better option in general for quickly topping up, as opposed to wax strips, which are going to be about 50%-ish water as carrier and generally need a set time to act very well. So there will always be a place for wet lubricants, and there'll always be, they're just a preferred option for some. However, the evidence, and if you've been following ZFC for any amount of time, the evidence of wax versus wet overall, especially when we're talking about dry conditions riding and dry off-road, it just hasn't even remotely been close. There's a reason why, the major players have been investing all their sort of focus really in R&D across into the wax space, and that will become again, so if it wasn't clear before, if this is the first ZFC video you're watching, it'll become pretty clear when we have a look at the data and the graphs. So that's sort of a little update on what's going on in the space. Now, what I like about Rex, and I guess what's important for the Rex Black Diamond product at the moment, is that this is the first immersive wax, quite potentially one of the first, I guess, products out there at the moment that give you the ability to tailor your blend. So you can see that there is the dark, what we call the friction modifier block, or mod block, that contains all the friction modifier goodies. And within the pack there are 11 base blocks for a total of 12 blocks, and that gives you a bit over 500 grams of wax per package. We have tested a high concentration blend of 4 base blocks plus the mod block, and also the full 11 base blocks as well as the mod block, and so we'll have that data to be able to pull up and compare. And there is definitely a notable difference between the two, and maybe not in the way you might expect sometimes. Okay, I checked before that my Excel is working, and my Excel is working, and I am proud to present to you these magnificent grade 3 graphs. All right, I've skipped putting up a graph for block 1, which is the initial block. It's an immersive wax. It does not have any initial penetration issues, and the wear rate being a top immersive wax is actually 0, so there's not really point doing that. The only immersive wax to really have a very poor result in block 1 has been Absolute Black's rather terrible graphene wax, which was 22% wear in block 1, and that is just nuts for an immersive wax to be able to deliver that amount of wear in what is basically 1,000 k's of indoor cycling. So skipping block 1. Block 2, which is where we start to add dry contamination. So we can see that the high concentration blend was basically perfect, 0%. Nothing happened. It's the level of protection and longevity of that blend is just, again, it's just 10 out of 10 perfect. The low concentration blend with the 11 base blocks plus the mod block It was still extremely low at 1.4%. Compared to the average of all the top immersive waxes tested. Now, I'm not including Absolute Black's graphene wax in the average for immersive waxes at the moment. There's really only been sort of, I think it's 5 or 6 tested, and the graphene wax performance just blows the averages right out. It makes sort of nonsense, so they're not being included in that average. It is really just the top ones. So, I mean, really, these wear rates are so low that it's really sort of within test and one chain to another variance anyway. We'll just call them all basically amazing. And that's what you get with the top immersive waxes. They're just coating your chain parts in a solid, super slippery coating of wax, basically leaving the chain metal out of it. Contamination has an extremely difficult time to penetrate. Dry dust contamination, just how does it get really from outside to deep inside the chain on the pin and inside the inner plate links and so on. That's really what you get, and every re-wax you're resetting whatever very small amount may have started to penetrate anyway. We can see the top 5 wax drip lubricants at 3.6% wear only in that block. They are also extremely high performing through that test, so that's again really the reason why wax is just such the focus for bicycle chain lubrication these days. Between immersive waxing and the top wax drip lubricants, they're just miles and miles ahead. We can see that even the top 5 wet drip lubricants tested are at 16.6%, so we're over sort of 4 times higher than the top 5 wax drip, and it's 8+ times higher than the immersive waxes. So, and the not so good wet drip lubricants tested are just, we're talking 70-80% mark, and quite a few at 50% plus. So they're just, wet lubricants, as we have discussed before, just obviously going to struggle in the world of dirt and dust. And if that is your writing, wax is what should be on your mind. And the average against all lubricants tested to date, we are getting what we expect from a top immersive wax, and it's just not really a competition. So all is as what we would like to see there, but do take note of where we're at with the high concentration blend versus the low concentration blend, as that will change as we have a look at the next graph. Okay, moving on to block 4, which is the wet contamination addition block. Again, I'm skipping block 3. Block 3 is really, it's more relevant for drip lubricants, especially wet lubricants, where they will have absorbed, a notable amount of contamination during the dry contamination block 2, and it's up to the lubricant to demonstrate, their typical marketing claims of clean as they lubricate and things like that. If they do some of that, then we see a reduction in the wear rate from block 2 versus block 3, or it might be similar, or sometimes it continues to increase. So there is quite a variance in performance, especially with wet lubricants, to some degree with wax lubricants. With immersive waxing though, it pretty much just resets again. Once we stop adding the contamination in block 2 and we do re-waxes in block 3, it just flushes out and resets. So again, that's your great benefit, and really the unassailable benefit that immersive waxes have over drip lubricants. You get that little bit of time to re-wax, but you get the payback for that, without having to do any solvent cleaning and other cleaning maintenance, just re-wax. So now into block 4 though, so this is where we are hitting it with water and contamination, and we can see there's a bit of a flip around here. So the high concentration mix for black diamond wax is basically around 4 times higher wear rate than the low concentration mix. So that is definitely a surprise. It was a bit of a surprise initially in testing, but was tested and retested and retested, and we also saw the same occur when we were doing the single application longevity testing with the performance of the high concentration blend versus the 11+1 in the dry longevity, and then in the high concentration versus 11+1 in wet, and again 11+1 came out on top. So we really were quite firm that was definitely what was occurring. And if you saw the test update for Hot Wax X, it's quite a striking sort of similarity where Hot Wax X has proven to be just basically perfect with regards to its wear protection and longevity in dry. However, had a really sort of uncharacteristically higher than expected wear rate in the wet, an extremely similar wear rate to Rex Black Diamond. High concentration blend, I should say. Now, Rex Black Diamond have confirmed that it is not graphene or nanine, so it's different to Hot Wax X, but I think we can say it's kind of in that family, and we're seeing something very similar. So, yeah, this is something really of note if you are doing or looking at the Rex Black Diamond as to what your type of riding is. That, if your riding is in the dry and you can afford the high concentration blend, then that is sort of really up there as an ultimate immersive wax blend. However, if your riding is in the wet, then the high concentration blend is really not going to give you the payback for that extra cost. The low concentration blend is what you're going to want to go with. If we're having a look at that versus the average of the top immersive waxes tested, again we are basically bracketing either side of the average, with sort of just a flip around which one is on the other side, though, with the high concentration blend this time being higher. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff there, and depending on where you live, like if it's pretty stable and you're doing dry riding all the time, it's an easy decision. If you do a lot of wet riding all the time, it's probably an easy decision. If you're doing a mix and you're really liking what the Rex has to offer, then it may be a case where you consider a couple of pots. Another pot's usually about $20-25. You can have a high concentration mix in one for dry and the 11+1 mix in the other one for wet, and you've got a pretty great sort of setup there. All right, just quick comparison of them versus the average of the top 5 wax strip lubricants. We can see that they're sort of pulling a fair way ahead there, again because of the amount of extra contamination that is brought in by the water. That ability of resetting every time you do a re-wax really starts to show a greater advantage for that type of cycling. We can see, however, the top 5 wet lubricants, they really pull a lot closer to the top 5 wax strip lubricants in the wet block, and then the average of all lubricants tested to date, because it's got a lot of pretty bad ones in there, it's sort of a fair bit higher than the top stuff. Alrighty, moving on to, I guess, basically what we'll call sort of the sort of final results really for the main test. This is the addition of all the wear rates through blocks 1 through 5, so 5,000 kilometers of testing. I do not yet include, or I guess use the full 6,000 kilometer test, which includes the extreme contamination block at the end. Reason being is that just so few lubricants have made it to that block, and through that block to be able to actually get viable data, that to actually have any comparative data across all the tests so far, so many lubricants it'd just be extrapolated data for block 6 on top of extrapolated data for block 4. So it's just extrapolation on top of extrapolation, and it's just really sort of wildly out there in ballpark. There's not a deep enough field of lubricants that have made it that far to have any meaningful comparison. So as with the cost to run modeling, I'm just using the first 5 blocks. Even that is sort of bad enough for how many lubricants have actually made it that deep into the test. So overall, we can see that still the high concentration blend is sort of a bit over double the cumulative wear versus the 11+1 blend, so 21.4% versus 8.9%. Really, that was just sort of knocked out by the wet contamination block 4. At the end of the first 3,000 kilometers of testing, so the first 3 dry blocks, the Rex BD 4+1 was basically perfect, and then basically all of that wear is pretty much the block 4 wear, whereas the 11+1 had some very small wear in the first 3 blocks, but then held up extremely well in the wet contamination block 4, and then again in the clean block 5. So really the 4+1 was the cumulative result has just been impacted by that wet block. So again, the 2 mixes have sort of bracketed the average for the top immersive waxes, which is coming out at 16.2 on average for all the top ones tested. The top 5 wax strip lubricants have done pretty impressive, really at 67.9% of the allowable wear mark by the end of that 5,000 kilometers of testing. The average of the top 5 wet drip lubricants is at 128.2%, and you don't want to know what the worst 5 is. and the average of all lubricants tested to date is at 84.1. So yeah, overall, great results. No, real bad surprises. Just the main point of note is, I guess, high concentration mix and wet, and so the same, I guess a very similar concern there for Hot Wax X when we get to do that detail review. Right, let's have a quick look at things in the table format. Let me know if the graphs are of use. Let me know, and I'll graph up the comparisons when I do the detail reviews. If they're not of any use and I can just show you the tables, then let me know, because I'll just show you the tables. Save me doing graphs. Some like graphs, some don't, but I'll probably go with the majority. All right, let's sort, or have a bit of a look. So no contamination block 1, we can see everything's amazing for all the immersive waxes, and also silk is synergetic. It's basically all perfect. When we go to sort by the dry contamination block 2, whoops, what did I do there, sorry. We can see that we've got Hot Wax X and Rex Black Diamond at basically perfect 0%, and then still really almost within test variance there for the other top immersive waxes. So just magnificent there. And then we can see if we sort of start, once we move out of the immersive waxes, in terms of the top performing in dry contamination block, we have Wax Lube, Wax Lube, Wax Lube, Wax Lube, Wax Lube. Silk is Synergy is snuck in there, Wax Lube, and then another Wet Lube. So in the top 13 we have 2 lubricants that are not wax. So that tells quite a story. Having a look at block 4. So wet contamination, we've got the 11+1 mix is the highest tested or highest performing immersive wax tested in the wet contamination block at a really, really low result. So almost sort of half of what Hot Melt was, which Hot Melt and MSW have sort of been the kings in that spot for a bit. And then we can see the 4+1 mix is sort of dropped a quite a notable measure on that. So that's, yes, as mentioned before, something really sort of just worth taking note of if you're going to have a really long, really a wet event, or you do a lot of wet training. Then the 11+1 mix that's your go-to, or obviously Hot Melt or MSW. Dry, then the high concentration mix is unreal. I'll skip up to the top part of the table. Cumulative wear, we've got the 11+1 mix as the new leader really for the lowest cumulative wear at the end of the 5,000 kilometers main test. So only a little bit ahead of new formula MSW. Hot Melt not too far behind there. And we can see that the 4+1's a little bit behind overall, but they're all pretty outstandingly low results when you're only talking sort of somewhere between basically 10 and 20% of the allowed wear mark at the end of 5,000 kilometers of pretty hard testing. Just the component longevity and just your day in, day out low friction with the top immersive waxes, it's just something else. If I have a look, including, because it is applicable to the immersive waxes, the test results at the end, including the Block 6 extreme contamination, Hot Melt is still on top at the end of the full 6,000 Ks, just because it does really good performances overall in Wet Block 4 and the Extreme Block 6, followed by M Speed Wax New Formula, Black Diamond 11+1 a little bit behind, and then the 4+1. So yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff there at the top of the leaderboard, but things do change around a bit depending on which sort of sort that you're looking at. So, but officially at the end of the full 6,000 kilometers of testing, Hot Melt's still numero uno, and that's not going to be beaten by Hot Wax X, because Hot Wax X, similar to 4+1, is just struggling in the once things get wet comparatively to the non I guess sort of super graphene stuff. Right, now it is worth just, I guess, to bring things into sort of some realism in terms of what are the gaps really. I mean, across 6,000 kilometers of testing, this is really tight. So we've got basically, say, a 4% difference between the hot melt and the M-Speed Wax new formula at the top of the charts there. That is basically 0.3 of a millimeter of difference in wear across the full 108 links of the chain after 6,000 kilometers. So because this is a percentage of the 0.5% wear allowance. So it is really, really tight. So don't freak out if you think, this is sort of 4% or 8% or whatnot higher at the end of this table. I mean, all of these are just, unreal, just the really outstanding performance that you're going to get. If you're sort of pondering through the ramble there as to what happened, why was 11+1 sort of half hot melt in the wet contamination block 4, and yet that's sort of flipped around a bit by the block 6 extreme contamination. If we just have a look at the sort by block for block 6, so the 11+1, it was basically a leading result in the block 4, but in block 6, the extreme contamination, the amount of water and contamination is doubled, and it is also applied twice as often through that test block. So it can be that something that holds up amazing in block 4, it just abrades through enough of it and gets through the treatment lifespan to create a marked difference in block 6. So we can see that hot melt was really more or less unfazed. The block 4 and block 6 result were pretty much identical. So it held on amazingly well through that, doubling. It's really sort of quadrupling the rate of contamination being thrown at it in that block. So that's how things change between those two comparisons, just in case you were pondering that. But yeah, all of this is up on the website, so you can go on and download this workbook and play around with the data table to your heart's content, and have a look at sort of what's what and what's going to be best for you. All right, ducking across to the single application longevity testing. All right, we can see that in basically what is, road conditions. So this is no contamination. This is just running on really what is just to say an indoor ergo at 250 watts. That the Rex Black Diamond Wax 4+1 blend is the longest lasting wax tested to date. We will see how Hot Wax X maybe shakes up the leaderboard. That's about to go on test. Hoping to get that machine going today with that test starting. However, we can see that yes, there are some of the longest lasting drip lubricants or wet lubricants tested are really sort of right up there, especially Synergy. That just that went on and on and on. So yeah, it's a bit interesting there. Please take note that the single application longevity testing is pretty fraught with how to make that somewhat realistic for you and your own riding. It is very difficult to model from a machine motor driven to an actual person out there riding. But this is sort of the best that we've got at the moment. We're just, again, it's really a benchmark test. If anything, we're giving you an approximate kilometers because we get kilometers from the test machine, but it's really about benchmarking the lubricants against each other, as opposed to trying to give you an accurate kilometers that you can expect. But we're sort of doing our best, but it's just take these with a big sort of ballpark approximation. The thing also to note with the immersive waxes, really a lot of lubricants, but immersive waxes especially, is that whilst they can, thanks to their fancy wear protective additives, keep going for an impressively long time without any wear starting to occur, that doesn't mean that they're going to be pleasurable to ride past a certain point. I can absolutely assure you that if you go to get 1,600 kilometers out of a Rex 4+1 application, you may actually be able to do that depending on your cycling, but past probably sort of around the, say, 800 kilometer mark, it's probably going to be starting to feel and sound really, really dry, and it just cannot be that pleasurable to ride past that. However, if you do find yourself having to push a treatment for a particular event, it is nice to know that they can just keep going and keep giving you that wear protection. And if there's not really any wear occurring, it's giving you that low friction protection as well. So a few caveats in there. Sorry to sort of ramble around it a bit, but it is a little bit of a tricky area, this one. So, but anyway, we can see 4+1 is currently the immersive wax leader until it's going to be very interesting to see if Hot Wax X can test that. And the 11+1 blend is still basically the sort of the next longest lasting of the immersive waxes tested. So pretty impressive stuff. So let me actually sort that table on this one properly. If you're wondering what's the difference between the kilometers to the wear rate, jump point, and to reach the wear allowance, I've got that all covered there. I've sort of rambled enough on this one at the moment. All right, once we get to dry contamination for the single application longevity, so it's the same as block 2, basically. We just sort of keep on going. So we can actually see that MSW new formula and the race blend of 4+1 were really, really similar. Again, that's sort of within test variance there. The 11+1 was you know, sort of notably down versus those, but it's still very competitive compared to sort of the hot melts and so on. So again, they're doing all very well. You'll notice that sorry for the rambling here, but you'll notice that the league table for the single application longevity is typically pretty small compared to the total of all lubricants tested. Two reasons. Number one, the original single application longevity test I had was really it proved itself to be not sufficient. So I introduced a much better one basically about 3 years ago, and it's sort of taking a long time to try to retest because testing's been so busy. And the other part as well is that most of the poor lubricants tested, I don't bother. There's just no point wasting the resources to do a single application longevity test if the lubricant's crap. If it's giving you a high wear rate just as it is with it being reapplied, there's just no point seeing how it's going to go in a single application test. It's a crap product. You shouldn't be using it anyway. Compare with what you may need for long events or long races based on the top stuff that's been tested. All right, heading across to the extreme contamination single application longevity. AB's Graphene Lube is still number 1 on that, followed by Synergetic, followed by Hot Melt, which it's quite an interesting how it sort of holds up in extreme as opposed to it sort of comes out more mid-pack in the immersive waxes on just the normal wet contamination, but throw more at it and it just sort of still thinks it's nothing's changed. We've got the 11+1 as expected once things get wet, quite a bit higher than the 4+1. So again, have a look at the league table on the website rather than me ramble on too much longer, but that's how it all is looking there. Okay, and to wrap, let's have a look at the cost to run modelling based on, again, blocks 1 to 5, so the first 5,000 kilometres of testing. We have, 4+1 blend and 11+1 blend in there. So you can see the 4+1 blend versus the other sort of top immersive waxes. It's hit a little bit by the cost. So you can see that we've just got 1 unit of cost for the 11+1 blend because you're basically using the pack, and that will last you 10,000k. For the 4+1 blend, for that time, you are really going to probably use, I guess, sort of 3 times that amount because you're only getting pretty much a third in there. That 4+1 blend, you really have a very low fill level in even fairly small pots, so that is going to need topping up pretty quickly. At the time of this publication, the separate mod block by Rex is not on the market, so that would require you to purchase further packs. And yes, you're going to get quite some sort of excess of the base blocks ready for when they do release the mod block. This figure here will change when they release the mod block and we see what price they'll be on sale for. But at the moment, if you're using the high concentration blend, unfortunately, you're just looking at buying more packs. So that cost really jumps up the cost to run for the 4+1 blend by a fair bit. So, but that's how things are modelling out. So the 11+1 and MSW are really quite close, as well as with hot melt. Sorry, let me redo the sort there. And it's still very competitive compared to obviously the drip lubricants. Having a look in the dry contamination test block, modelled out then over 10,000 kilometres, we can see that the 11+1 blend is doing overall really well. But again, the 4+1 blend, the cost goes up because you do re-wax more frequently when you are riding off-road or in harsh conditions. Treatment lifespans don't last as long, and you've got stuff to flush out. So that sort of really expensive cost of using that high concentration blend really again pushes things up a lot. But the 11+1 is very competitive. In the wet, the great result just across the wet block 4, contamination block for the, sorry, that should say 11+1. Let me fix that now. I did this just before recording. All right, so that the 11+1 is really sort of tied there with M Speed wax as sort of the lowest cost to run in wet conditions riding. So yeah, really sort of great stuff there. And again, 4+1's down a bit due to the cost, which is, we'll kind of expect, we'll see what Hot Wax X does due to the cost of Hot Wax X, but it's probably going to be somewhere hanging around here, I would think. Alright, so as a wrap, what do we think? So there's obviously a bit there in and out through the different blocks and the numbers and all that sort of stuff. To really just summarise it, it is another, sort of, I guess, absolutely top immersive wax option on the market. The high concentration blend gives basically just perfect results really in the dry test blocks. You just really can't get sort of lower wear than 0%, and it's extremely long lasting. So that high concentration blend in dry conditions, riding both road and off-road, it's really is perfect as we've seen. So it is brilliant. The issue at the moment, which we really need Rex to try to give us an ETA soon, is when are the extra mod blocks coming out? Because using just 1/3 of your base blocks with that mod block out of your pack, that very low fuel level does not last you sort of many re-waxes at all before you're going to need to get another pack to add another mod block and 4 base blocks in. So we need the mod blocks out ASAP so that the people who've already purchased the Rex Black Diamond wax can keep that high concentration blend going with the base blocks they've already got from their first pack, without having to spend another $90 plus shipping to get another whole pack and keep building up in excess of base blocks. So it's amazing, but we're going to need that mod block to make that really, I think, viable. At the moment, that 4+1 blend is really, I guess, a similar cost to Silka's Hot Wax X with Nanine, which is, if you've seen, it's obviously well over $200 Australian for a 300 gram tin. So it's very similar. The 4 blocks plus the mod block is basically 120 grams. So it's extremely sort of at the moment on par with Hot Wax X reprice, which is just super expensive. So yeah, come on, Rex. I know, I have emailed them a few times. I have hassled them. It is on the way. They've promised. They're just, I think the last bit is just working on the packaging and pricing for the mod blocks. So stay tuned. They promised they're on the way, and they do really need to be on the way to make that 4+1 blend viable for most. And when that happens, assuming that the pricing is hopefully not too expensive to get them, then that 4+1 blend is going to be just an outstanding option for a lot of cyclists as opposed to just very rich cyclists. So now in the I guess talking about the 11+1 blend, that's a really great all-round blend, and that is the preferred option out of the high concentration if you are going to introduce any wet cycling into the things. So again, it may be faffy for some to think, a ride sometimes I get caught out in the wet. Don't stress if it's the occasional wet ride. Just re-wax more frequently, as opposed to trying to get the ultimate longevity that it can give you in dry conditions riding. Just re-wax post-wet rides. It's always the recommended anyway with any sort of wax lube, is to retreat or re-wax. So just do that and don't stress. If you're going to be doing it all the time though, that's when you might consider, it's like, okay, I might have a winter wax pot and a summer wax pot, just because there is quite a measurable difference between the two blends across sort of the wet and the dry. So that is something I know that is being focused on by them for, something potentially in the future. But and I almost forgot to recap in the summary here that the 11+1 blend in the wet contamination block was actually the highest performing so far of the immersive waxes, which puts it at the top of the leaderboard for that block overall. So for general wet riding, that 11+1 blend really is something to consider. Yeah, but overall, final sort of, I guess, notes on the product and on Rex. I have been, sort of contracted by Rex for a long time for a lot of testing. They really have just put so much time and effort into making this product as great as it is and getting it to market. Just the progress that's been made with their base blocks alone, from the first blends that we tested to, what's gone out to production. There's been just a huge sort of step forwards across the number of blends that we've tested in the development. So they really have put a lot of, just genuine great sort of R&D and cost and effort into, what sits behind this product. And we've now got another great product option on the market, along with hot melt and molten speed wax. They're just brilliant options for us all. So that will do. Hopefully, the detail review covered all the detail you could wish for and more on this one. And yep, as I've mentioned before, I'll be trying to work my way through a big backlog of detailed product reviews that I've got to get done. And I've got a whole list of stuff to cover on a bit of just a low friction news update. If I get to it as well today, I will see. Otherwise, I'll do that one first next Friday. If I don't come back, have a great weekend, everyone. Have some hopefully great cycling, and don't forget to check out some of the cool action that'll be on the TV this weekend. I believe there's another World Cup round, which is going to be great, and also another MotoGP round to give me heart palpitations every time Marquez hops on that Honda. Wow, Ollie Batman, that is a heck of a situation, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I will look forward to catching you all on the next vid. Thanks, bye.